To add texture to your materials, you want to use maps. Let's go into our material editor and we'll explain a little bit about mapping. All of the parameters of a shader, we're going to use the blend here. Most of these parameters have these little boxes right next to them. And what those boxes mean is that you can add a map to any one of these parameters. So for example, here I have opacity. I can dial in my opacity, or if I want, I can use a map. For my diffuse color, I can use a map. In fact, if we scroll down to this rollout here, where it says maps, these are all the different maps that we can use for this particular shader. Now, if I went to a different shader, those types of maps, for example, this one has a lot more maps. So these are going to change a little bit depending upon the type of shader you use. Let's go back to blend. And I'm going to bring up my little sphere here. Well, first of all, let's just deal with color. I can always just change the color of the object, but that's pretty basic. If I wanted to give it some real texture, I can use any one of these maps that come with Macs. Now, these are the ones that ship with Macs. You can get a number of other ones off of the internet that you can use third-party mapping types. You can also buy them from plug-in vendors. So there's really a wealth of different types of mapping available. There's basically two types of maps. There are bitmaps that allow you to use an image file for your color or whatever. Or we have also a number of different mapping types. One of my favorites, of course, we have checker, which you can use, or cellular. I like cellular a lot because it allows you to get some fairly organic types of textures. Now, within each one, let's go through cellular a little bit here. First of all, I want to show you a little bit about how to navigate this window here. When I have this map, I can get to it through one of two ways. I can click here. Now, what this does is it changes all of my rollouts to just the parameters for that particular map. If it was a bitmap, we'll get into that a little bit later. With bitmaps, it would be the mapping coordinates for the bitmap. For this particular one, it's the color and size of the cellular procedural map. Now, to get back to where we once were, we have to hit this button that says Go to Parent. Now, mapping in Macs is fairly hierarchical, so let me show you a little bit what that means. So instead of a cellular map, let's go ahead and put a checker map on here. Now, notice what it says here, keep old map as a submap. I'm going to discard the old map, but let's go ahead and create a submap here. Start here, go to the parent. Now we're going to go down one level. We're going to click on either here or here and go into that checker that's affecting our diffuse color. And here it says diffuse color. Now if I want, I can go even further. Now notice how next to the color of the checker, I can change the color. Okay, now we have purple and white. But if I wanted purple and something else, I can either change the color from white to something else, or I have another map. Now this can go on ad infinitum. I mean, it can go on forever. So let's say in one of the squares of my checker, I want to have my cellular. Okay, so now I've got a cellular, go to parent, inside my checker, which is affecting my diffuse color. Now this can get pretty intense because I can go to my cellular map, and let's go through some of those parameters here. We have one for cell color. So I can make it whatever color I want. And then we have another one for these things called division colors. And we can make it into chips. That's great for like a terrazzo type of floor. Fractal. Size of the cells. The spread. So on and so forth. All of these different parameters. You can fiddle with those and pretty much figure it out. It's pretty obvious. But we can go even deeper. So instead of a cell color of kind of a mustard color, I can go and I can add yet another map. So again, you can go as deep as you want with this. And this is a really good way to build up some very complex textures. So I'm going to go up all the way to my top. And if I want, I can hit this button, and that will go ahead and reset my maps, which is fine. So let's go ahead and talk a little bit about some of these other channels. We have self-illumination. Okay. Let's show you a little bit about how opacity works. Checker's a good one for opacity. Now, if you notice with this checker parameter here, we have black and white, and in max, black is transparent. So if I would have an image map that was entirely black, that would make the object transparent, and then as it fades to white, the opacity would change. But also, I have another option here. I'm going to go up to my parent, and I'm going to scroll down here. And under opacity, I also have another spinner here. So if I want, I can dial down my spinner and says, okay, I really only want 42% of this map to affect that channel. Okay. So again, so that way I can actually, if I want, I can set a master and a maximum and a minimum opacity here. But the spinner here allows you to control how much of this map comes in. Probably a better example would be bump mapping. Now, I'm going to show you another little trick here. Let's say we want to get rid of this checker map. It's very simple. You just you can actually move maps around. Let's say I wanted to make my diffuse color checker. I can let me show you again what I did here. Click and drag, and you can just drag maps between channels just by clicking and dragging. Now, if I want, I can make a copy of that map, or just like with copying objects, I can make an instance of this map, which would allow it to, so as this map changed, so would the other one. So they're all tied together. Now, if I want to get rid of a map, you just click one of these empty slots and drag it over, and now we don't have any mapping. Let's go on to bump mapping here, and I'll show you a little bit more about how this amount slider works. Let's work with dent. Noise is another good one to use for bump mapping. Let's use dent. Dent's kind of a good one. Now again, I have two parameters here. I can have two different colors. I've got the size of the dents, strength, number of iterations, 0, 1, 2, 3, and so on and so forth. That's kind of a little bit better than noise in that it gives it kind of more of a random, rough kind of surface. But this controls, again, the amount of that map. So if I bring it all the way up, it's really, really dented. Bring it down. I can even bring it negative. So now my dents become bumps. So this is a good way to dial in and tweak some of your mapping. We also have reflection and refraction maps. With reflection, you can actually put in a bitmap for reflection. Or if you want, we have Max also supports ray tracing, so you can put a ray trace material in there that will actually ray trace the reflections. You can also put what's called a flat mirror. Now this really only works for planar surfaces such as a floor, and that will just compute a simple reflection. It doesn't really work on curved surfaces, but it is handy for certain types of applications. Now another thing we can map would be our specular level. This is good for creating kind of rough specularity, such as like a bumpy glass or something like that. Let's put some noise in there. Notice how the specularity is changing here. In fact, let me get rid of some of that bumpiness so we have a smoother surface. Go into that, and by changing the amount of noise, we can actually change how the specularity works. So that's good for making highlights that aren't exactly round and aren't exactly smooth. It's good for surfaces that aren't smooth. If we wanted to, I could drag my dent in there, make it an instance or a copy, and that would change my specularity as well to somewhat match what my surface is. Again, sometimes you want to tie some of these together, like your diffuse color, maybe your specular color or your specular level, those sorts of things. Again, you've got a lot of different options here, and let's get on to actually mapping images and getting more specific about placement of maps on objects.